Okay, so we are going to start now, and what I want you to do is just follow me. Okay, I'm just gonna try one thing. Put your hands here. Everyone, look at me. Who is not looking at me right now? Okay, just put your hands here, and now make a circle. Bring closely to your face and touch your chin. How many of you are touching your chin with the circle? तो इससे क्या हासिल हुआ कि हम जो देखते हैं वो हम करते हैं, जो हम सुनते हैं वो हम नहीं करते. So when we teach our children, they actually do what we do. They don't do what we tell them to do. Anyways, so yeah, I'm going to start with the presentation. And let's see, how many of you are working with Angular so far? One. Okay. I'll try to see how can I make this full screen. Okay, so how many of you know Angular? Can you raise your hand? Okay. So Angular is basically one of the frameworks that is out there for developing web apps. How many of you want to know Urdu में बात करूं? Can you raise your hands? बेहतरीन, जबरदस्त. ठीक है, Angular एक ऐसा फ्रेमवर्क है, और जब हम फ्रेमवर्क की बात करते हैं तो हम बात करते हैं सेट ऑफ टूल्स की, सेट ऑफ कॉन्सेप्ट्स की, जिसके अंदर रहते हुए हमें वेब एप्लीकेशंस बनानी होती हैं. ठीक है, तो बहुत सारे फ्रेमवर्क्स और लाइब्रेरीज आपको मिल जाएंगे. रिएक्ट, बैकबोन JS, बहुत सारे इस तरह से पहले भी आए थे और मजीद और भी क्रिएट होते जा रहे हैं. लेकिन Angular is one of my favorites and I'm going to tell you why. तो सिंपली अगर आपको वेब एप्लीकेशंस बनानी है, वन ऑफ द वेज इज कि आप शुरू से स्टार्ट करें. ट्रेडिशनल जो वेब डेवलपमेंट थी वो करें, विच मीन्स कि आप HTML लिखेंगे, उसके बाद आप स्क्रिप्ट टैग लगाएंगे, जावास्क्रिप्ट इंक्लूड करेंगे, लिंक टैग लगाएंगे, CSS इंक्लूड करेंगे, और फिर यू कैन गो फॉर. लेकिन Angular में बहुत सारी चीज़ें ऐसी हैं जिसके थ्रू आप वेब एप्लीकेशन बहुत तेज़ी से बना सकते हैं और बहुत अच्छे तरीके से उसको इम्प्लीमेंट भी कर सकते हैं. ठीक है, सो let me introduce myself. Anyone who knows me so far? 1, 2, 3. Okay, not very popular. So I'm Mohammed Ahsan. I am a senior software engineer at Klarna. I am a Google developers expert in web technologies, which means that Google acknowledges my expertise, and I'm basically in web technologies as well as in Angular. So I've gone through a lot of interviews and I've written a lot of content. I've created a lot of videos. I've spoken to a lot of conferences, and that's why Google acknowledges that I'm an expert in one of the Google built technologies. And you can become a GD as well. If you want to know, you can reach me out later. I'm associated with some communities, including DevInCode. So this is a community which helps other communities. So if you want to create a community, you can go to DevInCode and they can provide you like venues, resources for Facebook Live and stuff like that. They do provide different people for the usual tasks, like bringing food. And I'm also working with Ngx Girls. So this is a community which is working with females, obviously, for Angular. So they conduct a lot of workshops in which they teach you Angular from ground up, from scratch. So they have a very good outline, and you just go there with your laptop and you'll learn Angular in like a day or two. I'm also running as an organizer Angular Pakistan. So this is a community that has done a lot of meetups, and we are also going to have a meetup next week, probably here. So you can search Angular Pakistan on Facebook, and you can subscribe to the events, and then you can join us. I have a small team which is called IOMAX. We are a group of 6 people, and we are working with a lot of clients throughout the world, and we are building web and hybrid mobile applications. And I'm also running Node School Karachi. I think we have an event in August for that. So if you're interested in Node.js or backend programming using JavaScript, this is the event that you want to go to. So if you want to find me on Twitter, can you feel the difference in my voice? I'm trying to deliver a message. So you can find me on Twitter using Ahsan Ayaz. Do follow me. And you can also see one of my works in GitHub. So the link is this. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. Okay? Do not try to find me on Facebook, ever. And you can also see a channel that I run on YouTube, which is called JS Fuel. The hashtags for this event, I wish my talk was in the beginning, but these are the hashtags for this event. So if you want to take any pictures, you use these hashtags on Facebook and Twitter, okay? So you can just see them once and recall. So one of the things I'm going to share regarding my experience is I'm going to try to get out of this. Oops. So if I go here and try coming out from here. So this is my GitHub, and if you have not created a GitHub account yet, do that because it will help you immensely in your professional life. You can work on different projects and list them down, and then people will see you. My GitHub is enough for my portfolio. I don't have to share anything else, right? So I've actually worked with the core Angular projects. So we have a CLI, Angular CLI, through which you create the project and then you add components. So I've contributed to that. If you have heard about Ionic, I've contributed to that. I've created libraries with Angular. So one of the libraries I'm going to show is this Ngx device detector. So I created it like 2 years ago, and it has like 195 stars on GitHub. Believe me, no one gives you a star on GitHub unless they really like something. And it recently crossed 1.1 million downloads on GitHub. So this is being used by a lot of developers in the Angular community. And you can also see this is a feature on GitHub where you can see that how many packages on GitHub use your package or use your library. So there are around 600 packages which are using my library, and those packages might be used by hundreds and thousands of users. So yeah, let's get into Angular and see what that is. So a bit, but a lot about Angular. So Angular is not just a framework. It's basically a community. And I tend to say that a lot because it is actually. So when we talk about the community, it is something that is growing Angular. There are a lot of features in Angular which were created by community. And they look forward to talk to different people in the community, get their feedback, and then they also decide what's best for the framework. And the community is highly involved in evolving the framework. So if you start working with Angular, and if you start posting issues to the Angular package, or if you start sharing your experiences, you are part of the community and you're welcomed. So one of the examples is recently I went to Malaysia with my team, IMX, and you can probably see me here in the middle in the white shirt. So this was an event, the first event of Angular internationally in the Southeast Asia, and it was brilliant. You can see how many people are there, the speakers, the community, the engagement, the networking with the people who started working with Angular was amazing, and the speakers were so humble. So you could go to them, ask them questions, and they would just answer whatever your questions are. One of the interesting things that struck me was this. So I told you about experts who Google acknowledges. So being an expert is not a piece of cake. You have to do a lot of work to show your impact on the community. I have millions of downloads of my package, right? So these people are also experts. They are not like ordinary people in the university. This is Henry Lim and Win Lim. They both are in Malaysia. They are experts in web technology. And when I'm talking about community being amazing, this is what they're doing. They were dressed like these. They were funny. They kept communicating with everyone in a really good way, so everyone felt welcome. And this is amazing. This is what we need in here. I can't imagine what would happen if I dressed up like this and stood here. What would happen? So this is something that we really need to change. So let's talk about Angular's core team values. So the team Angular is constantly pushing boundaries to work with the team and making Angular a good place. So they basically want to create the apps that people love to use. They want to have the apps which developers love to build, and a community where everyone is welcome. So if you go to an Angular event, no one would say that you are a newbie or, why are you even working with web technologies, stuff like that. So it's pretty welcoming. So Angular team basically took a survey from different enterprises and found out a couple of interesting things. One of them was the Angular CLI. So the Angular CLI is something which you install like in the beginning, and then you create projects using that. You just write one command and you get a lot of files automatically created for your Angular project. And you can test your code, you can implement unit tests, end-to-end tests, and there's a whole tool chain that you can use, but it all starts with Angular CLI. Angular team has an opinionated architecture, which means that if you're working in a team, and if you leave the team and someone else comes in the team, the person will not find it difficult to work with your code. Why? Because it is opinionated. It has an opinion of how things should be working, where to put the data manipulation code, where to put the API calls. So everything is opinionated and having a standard. Okay. Whereas some of the frameworks that we use, they don't have. You will find cases where even within a team, different people are working with totally different coding styles. So Angular has an opinionated architecture. That's why enterprises like Angular. And the community. We see great stuff from community every day. People are making amazing things, and I'm going to show you some of the things as well. So let's talk about the Angular ecosystem. As I said, it's a framework, but it has a lot of cool things around it. So these are all the things that you get with Angular. You get Angular animations, you get Angular CLI, you get Angular CDK. How many of you know about Bootstrap? Awesome. How many of you know about Material UI? Okay. So Angular CDK is something through which you can create your own component libraries like Bootstrap and Angular Material, because it has things like that which can be used to build up your own components. Similarly, we have a lot of things. We have web components, we have forms, HTTP, internationalization. We also have like language services. So in VS Code, if you are using VS Code, they have an extension and it will quickly highlight your code if it finds any mistake. So it's intelligence plus the language services that makes the overall developer experience really good. And then we are also talking about progressive web app. So Angular also has a quick tool that you can use to convert your regular Angular application to a progressive web app, and it doesn't even take like half an hour. And it also has a kind of ecosystem which contains Material UI. So you can use Angular Material with your Angular applications to have the material design implemented in your applications. Now let's move forward. You can install different packages. For instance, you just created an Angular application. Now you want to use Bootstrap maybe. So you can add different packages to your Angular applications by running this command. And this is run on the Angular CLI. So you can add different third-party libraries or packages to your Angular projects. I'm going to talk about schematics. This is one of the features which is great, and I'm going to tell you why this is very important. So schematics is a feature which transforms the files in memory. So for instance, if you had to update a package or update some part of your code and you started the process, now if something failed in the beginning, where does the code stand? In the initial state or in the final state? You don't know, maybe it's stuck in the middle. And consider if you have a lot of files, what would happen? So schematics is a feature which transforms everything in memory, and if something fails, it reverts itself in the memory and nothing is written on the disk. So the files are never actually changed if you are running it with some errors. So it also can be used to scaffold projects. For instance, you have an organization and you have certain rules. For instance, you have to have some particular files within your projects, some license file, some README files, or it could be anything else. It could even be code. So you can create your own schematics within your organization, and every developer can then use it. So your developer would just run one command, and you will have that standard package coming out with all of the files and all of the code needed, and then you can pursue with that. So by default, Angular has its own standard, but you can extend it using schematics. So this is how basically schematics works. So consider you have a tree of nodes. So you have the root folder, and inside you can have 2 folders, and inside you can have multiple folders as well. So when we apply the schematics, everything is, when something is updated, this happens in the UI, or you could also be adding something to your projects or your files. So that's pretty much about schematics. And if you want to convert or add mobile specifications to your web app, for instance, you have created an Angular web application. Now you want to have a mobile application as well. You can quickly use this very ng add command, which is based on schematics, with Ionic or native script. So you can quickly have a mobile app running with this command. So you can simply do ng add Angular Ionic from your project's root, and it will install Ionic, and it will also modify some of the things in your packages to install and set up everything. And this is very quick. You can even try that when you go home. And you can also use native scripts schematics, which is also one other way of having a mobile site with Angular. So you can choose between Ionic and native script when you're working with Angular. And there is much more. You can add progressive web app package to your Angular application to convert it into a PWA. You can use Angular elements, which are web components. Anyone knows about web components? I think Mashood talked about Polymer. So web components are kind of a new standard which is coming, which means that just like we have HTML tags like video, source, audio, similarly we can create our own custom HTML tags like checkout, and that checkout component will have everything within that, and that will work on every browser, even without a framework, even without Angular, React, anything. It will be native to the browser. So you can also use Angular elements for having that. You can use Ngx, which is used for managing the state. So you have an enterprise application which has huge data between different pages. So you navigate from one page to another and then come back, and now the previous state is lost. So to manage and cache state, you can use Ngx, which is based on Redux, which is used with React. So Ngx is basically Angular port of Redux. And you can also use other things like ng build plus. I'm not going to talk about that. Now I'm going to show you some of the community projects because I've been saying community is amazing. So one of the projects is StackBlitz. StackBlitz is an online tool that you can use to create Angular projects online. So you can just go to the site, create a project right there, and you can work with the files. You can also export the Angular project by downloading it, and then you can work on it locally as well. So this is a really good tool, and this is amazing because many projects on GitHub, when they share code samples or examples, they refer to StackBlitz, because if you want to show a demo, you have to have that on your machine. You cannot show it directly without hosting that. But you can simply create a project on StackBlitz, write some code, show some demo, and then you can link it to your documentation. So it's very easy. And you can also create other projects like React, Ionic, Angular, but I'm going to show this for Angular for now. There's one more thing called Ngx. So Ngx is basically a tool from the community which can contain multiple Angular apps within one workspace. You could always have React as well. So it doesn't matter what framework you are using. I think right now they're supporting Angular and React, but I'm not sure about other frameworks. But you could have multiple applications within a project or within a workspace, and you could have like a library which is shared between those two. For instance, Google. If you notice buttons on Google applications, you will find that they are almost similar. So they may be using a library at one place, and all of the applications are accessing that library for the button element. So it's at one place, but it's being reused everywhere. So this is one of the other cool tools that we have from the community. We have Ngx Bootstrap. So if you are working with Bootstrap layout, you can use that with the Angular application. You can go to simply Ngx Bootstrap site and you can see different examples of date picker, button, and whatnot. Similarly, you have Angular Material. So Angular Material looks like this. It has its own design principles like shadow and how the cards would look. So you can also use material design with your Angular applications using Angular Material. And finally, no, not this one. So we have Ngx, which is used for state management. If you have a really large application and you want to maintain the state at one place, consider different pages like in the air, and you have the data at one state, and every page accesses the data from that single state rather than having different states at different pages. So it centralizes your database, and by database I just mean things that are on the UI. For instance, user information, for instance, products that you fetch from the API. You can have them at a single place, and then you can fetch that. Now, I told you about this one, and this is a shameless plug. So you can also use Ngx device detector if you want to find on which platform your application is running. Have you seen any developer who is about to update the project? Anyone? Have you ever updated a project? the dependencies? No. Let me tell you how this looks. So it looks something like this. As simple as that. Whenever we are talking about project updates, anything can go wrong and that becomes a pain. For that, we have Ngx update. For instance, you are using the Angular application with Ngx Bootstrap. Now you have the Bootstrap and everything is working, but probably there's a bug in some component. And in future, they updated it. Now what you need to do is you have to update Ngx Bootstrap. Now if Ngx Bootstrap was also dependent on another package, you would have to update that as well. And if that had a dependency, you would have to do that as well. So Ngx update basically does all that for you because the code or the logic behind Ngx update is written by Ngx Bootstrap. They are managing how that happens. You don't have to. So all the responsibility goes to the library maintainers to implement all of this logic, that how the application will be updated without having any errors. So this is a really good command, so you don't have to do everything yourself. Now, Ngx update can potentially add or edit some files within your project. It could also delete some files which may not be necessary, and it may also install additional packages which it may depend on. So you don't have to do anything apart from just running that command. Okay, so we are going to talk about what's new, and the overall topic was what's new in V8. So in V8, version 8, in the Angular CDK, we now have drag and drop. So you can consider building an app like maybe Trello. So you have some tasks that you have to do, and now you have a done column. So you can simply drag and drop something from one column to another. This wasn't there before, but now it's there. So you can use the drag and drop even within the list or in the other lists as well. We do have virtual scrolling. So if you have like hundreds of thousands of elements on your UI, and I'm going to be shocked why you have them, but still, if you have a lot of data on your UI, you don't have to have that, because the more data you have on the UI, the heavier the DOM becomes, and the more laggier the application would be. It would be janky. So what you need to do is that if you have a lot of things on the screen, smartly, we can just keep some of them in the view and the other out of the view. So everything will not be on the screen or on the DOM or on the UI, but only the things that we see right now. So virtual scrolling does the same. If you see this scrolling, this has thousands and thousands of elements, but eventually whatever you see in one time at the screen may be 4 or 5 elements. So in memory, it's only keeping like 10 elements, and all the other elements are not on the screen. But as you scroll, it then optimizes it. So it is really good in terms of performance. Now I'm going to talk about differential loading. This is one feature that came recently in Angular CLI. So imagine browsers like Chrome, Safari. We have also Edge or Internet Explorer. So the new standards that we work on basically do not work with older browsers. And the new browsers are now capable of having lesser JavaScript shipped to them. But the old browsers are still wanting more JavaScript. So how do we improve that? Because right now we are again shipping a lot of JavaScript to the new browsers as well. But the new browsers are smart enough to work with lesser. So differential loading is a way to create 2 bundles, one for the new browsers and one for the old browsers. And Angular basically knows or contains the information that browsers should pick which bundle, the newer or the smaller. What is the benefit of fetching the new bundle? The newer bundles are smaller, so browsers will fetch them faster, and this will improve in the user experience. Okay. Now the next thing is, so when they experimented the differential loading on the Angular.io application or the site, they saw that the difference was between 7 to 20%. So the load time decreased to like 7 to 20%. Now we also have one thing which is called Ivy, and if you are interested in Angular, you will hear this a lot. Ivy is basically a new rendering engine which decreases the bundle size. So when you have to deploy your application to the cloud, you are making a production build. And when you create it with Ivy, the bundles will be smaller. For instance, right now we do have 151 KB or 151 kilobytes of the bundle when you create a simple hello world application. With the differential engine, the two bundles that I talked about, it would decrease to 131 KB from 151 to 131. If you use IV with it, it decreases to 126. Now if you use differential plus IV, it will go to 109 KB. We are talking about a simple hello world application, but we are talking about how the size reduces. And once IV is stable, it will go all the way down to 14 KB. And this is tremendous. Once IV is stabilized, it will be less small. So you can see that from 151 KB to just 14 KB, and this is amazing. So if you want to work with Angular applications, and if you're already doing that, you can simply pass this -- enable IV flag when you're creating an application. And this is, by the way, how you create an application. You just say ng new my app, and all of the files and the folders are created for you. When you say enable IV, it will have the configuration for IV enabled for you. Now the IV is right now in the opt-in preview, which means that there may be cases where your applications might not work. So it can work for smaller applications, but if you have a really large applications, depending on third-party libraries, this may be not the right time. So you can wait for Angular v9 when it is more stable. So as I said, not all third-party libraries support IV. Even my library that I created is currently not supporting IV. There's one more tool called Bazel, and I'm going to just run through this. So this is an additional tool that you can use to fasten up your development. So for instance, you created a production build today, okay, and then you change one file, and then you have to create another build. Right now, it will create the whole process again, but with Bazel, it will only add what changed to the build, which means faster build processes, which means if you have continuous integration and continuous delivery in your processes, it will become faster. So Bazel is currently in experimental support. We are expecting that it may be stabilized in the Angular v9. So going forward, we right now have experimental support for Bazel. There's a part called Angular Labs, which is a project in which all these experimental things are kept until they are finalized. So they experiment themselves, they share with certain people like us to test them out. So it's part of the Angular Labs. Whenever you hear something that it's part of Angular Labs, that means that it is not finalized yet. Okay. So what changed actually? So we had a package before called Angular HTTP. It was in Angular v4. It was deprecated in Angular v4, and we were still using them in some of the applications. So that's not supported anymore. We have a package called Angular Common HTTP. We just use that, just something to know when you're working with that. And there was also a code change. So if any one of you have worked with Angular, there was a code change that requires this static false to be there whenever we are using this view child. And that's the only breaking thing that came up when Angular v8 was released. Now what to expect in v9? In v9, we are expecting IV to be the default engine. We are expecting a stable support of Bazel with the Angular CLI, so they will be combined, and you will get faster reloads when you are even developing and when you're creating the builds. And an enhanced IV API, which will make things much more easier. I'm not going to talk about that right now, but some things will change in the IV API. So in the end, I'm just going to say that you can install me, and the way you do that is this. If you have Node.js installed in your machine, which I presume not, you can simply run this command npx -ayas on a Node.js terminal, and this will install my business card in your machine, and you can have all the links that you want to connect. Okay? I think I'm in time. And yes, if you have any questions, you can ask me. You can ask me after my time as well. And thank you so much. These are my handles. You can copy them. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.